pretty useless at this sort of stuff, you know. Oh, hey! I love the background.
Yes. Does it look like I'm sat in the fountain?
It does look like you're sat in the fountain. Yeah, very, very good. At first, I thought it was the White House. You know, I thought it was a USA or something. Yes.
Yeah, that's got all sorts of weird connotations. We don't want to go there, do we?
Not really, not really. No. How you been anyway?
Not too bad, actually. Yeah, it's been very busy, hasn't it? Very intense, I think, as well for a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah.
How are you finding it?
Well, we've done really well. It's been full on actually over the last 3 months. We haven't stopped. You know, I must admit it's been 12-hour days and working Saturdays. You know, 6 days a week, trying to get a game of golf in and stuff like that. And the news is continual, isn't it? It's been and at one point we were doing 2 e-zines a day and trying to keep on top of it all. And it got very frightening for a lot of people, you know, because you're trying to do your job, aren't you? You're trying to be a parent, trying to be a husband, trying to be a colleague, trying to be all these different hats you're trying to wear. And I think now we're coming out at the end of it. You know, it's you can see, I don't know, it's a little bit more easy, but at one point it was looking very scary, wasn't it? So
I think it was. I think if you think about actually the underlying issue is about your health, isn't it? And actually people are dying.
Yeah.
That is a bit scary, but I think people have been, you know, everybody's been trying to do all those things you said, which I think it's just focused us a lot more. It made things a lot more intense. I do feel as businesses that we are, as business owners, we are living with this kind of thing all the time. Actually, the world is changing very rapidly, as we know. You know, change is the new normal, as they like to say. And actually, it just made it very intense and very fast for a period. But I think a lot of things that were happening, a lot of the consequences of the pandemic for business owners are actually almost day-to-day stuff, just perhaps not quite so fast and not quite so intense, because the world is changing so quickly anyway, which is something that we all need to get used to. But certainly my conversation, we are talking to a lot of people, giving support, and I think that's really important for people actually. Not to be afraid to reach out and ask for help, and actually rely on each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing about the Gloucestershire business communities. We know we all do tend to support each other very well anyway, and reach out to each other and, you know, share stories and do all those things we do to keep Gloucestershire businesses thriving. And there's a lot of people doing, you know, as you said, they're fighting hard for their businesses, which is what we need to be doing at the moment. Yeah.
I think also in the early stages, you know, a lot of people were very, very upset, as you can imagine. They could see before the government came out with the furlough scheme and before they started giving all the sort of tax incentives and sort of giveaways, shall we say. At one point, I mean, I had a number of business people, you know, basically crying on the phone. I mean, they'd taken all their lives to build up family businesses. They'd taken everything to build this up. And suddenly they could see it crumbling around. And also there's that emotive side, not just the business, but the people that they work with. You know, and knowing that they're going to have to let some really good people go. I think we're coming through the other side of that. I think it's going to be tough as hell. I think the economy is going to be really hard hit, as we all know, you know, massive unemployment. And it really is about putting those plans in place, isn't it? And having a strategy. I mean, that's what I did with Punchline. Within 4 or 5 days when I decided to work from home, you know, I got up at 4 in the morning, I wrote a plan on my wall and I managed to, you know, literally on my wall, on those plastic sheets on the wall, and then I could get focused on something. But how did you find it? How did your customers find it?
Well, I think you said a lot of things there, which I think without wanting to get political, I think the government have really kind of stepped up in a lot of ways. And I think the support that they've offered has given businesses an opportunity and, you know, has been helpful. And I know that, you know, hospitality businesses, for example, are affected a lot more perhaps than other businesses. And some businesses, some of our clients who are in online retail, for example, are actually doing quite well at the moment in terms of turnover. But those were opportunities. So again, I think you're right. You know, the plan and taking those opportunities that were there. So that was really important, that people didn't kind of freeze and procrastinate too much. We had to go into survival mode and do what needed to be done. And you know, we need to be coming out of survival mode and going into thrive, adapting and thrive. But you know, you are right. We don't really know what the economy is going to look like. There's talk of a V-shaped recovery, which I think is interesting. I kind of think of a dead cat bounce as well, to be fair. So the economy dropped by such a lot, the first part of it's bound to come back quite quickly. I think there is going to be more fallout when the furlough scheme ends, but again, the government is talking about various other things they can do to support. I think the banks should get a mention, frankly, with the B-bills and the C-bill schemes. I think they took a lot of criticism in 2008 with the global financial crisis, but considering that they were also working from home and had limited resources like all the rest of us, I think that scheme has worked pretty well. We certainly put a lot of funding in place for a lot of businesses, and the banks have turned it around quite quickly. So I think actually, they do deserve some credit for that. But it is people. I think you're absolutely right. You need a plan, don't you? You need a plan. But then, if you've got a plan, you need to implement it as well, and you need to keep checking it and revising it as we get more information. I think the key word you use, which I use a lot, is focus, actually, and part of it has been cutting through the noise, I think, which is certainly what we've tried to do with clients. We've tried to share information in a concise and easy to understand way, but actually a lot of that information is available, and then it's cutting through the noise. There's so much noise out there. It's trying to pick out the really powerful stuff that's relevant to you and focus on what you need to be doing, because you can just get distracted by all the talk. Nobody knows what the economy is going to do. We do know it's smaller than it was. But allied to your business, I think, is I tend to say to people, well, yes, the economy is still small, but it's still going to be several trillions of pounds of economy. So, it means that you need to win more market share. And how do you win market share? Well, you need to be clear on what your product is and what your solution is for your customer. You need to have adopted over the last couple of months to be more efficient in terms of your processes. And I think, again, that's where it's been interesting. Zoom, we're having this conversation on Zoom, aren't we? Something that we've been talking about doing for a while in terms of having more contact with clients through Zoom rather than traveling to a meeting. Spend 30 minutes in a car to go to an hour meeting and 30 minutes afterwards. That's an hour in the car you don't need to be doing. So I think we've been forced into embracing some of the technology a bit quicker, or not necessarily quicker, but stuff that we talked about doing we didn't get around to, we've now been forced into doing, and actually we're not going to let that go. So I think that's important. So if you've got a plan and you've worked on efficiencies and embraced technology, and you've got a good product, what's the last thing you need to do? Well, promote, Mark. Promote.
Yes, come on.
Because you need to win market share, don't you? The market's got smaller. You need to win a bigger market share.
And actually, honestly, mate.
Is that all right if I give you a plug, Mark? Is that okay? And actually, the clients that we're talking to, the ones that are really pushing there, are the ones that are now realising, they've gone through that process of efficiency, if you like, and they know what they need to be doing with their plan. And actually, they are now starting to focus on promotion. And I think, again, that's where the B-bills and the C-bills schemes have been interesting, because I think what you've got there for a lot of clients is a 50 grand potentially cash inflow that a chunk of that would have come from profit that you would have been making anyway over 2 or 3 months, but now you've got this lump sum. And the question I'm asking clients is, what are you going to do with this lump sum? Are you just going to put it in the bank and hope actually that it will still be there in 6 months, and then when you start repaying it, or you can pay it back? Or are you actually going to sit back and say, right, now I've got 50 grand. If I was going to spend half of that, 25k, what would I do with it? What would be a great thing to do with my business to make me more future-proof, to help me to adapt to the new economy, the new market? How could I spend that money? Now, that's not to say that you are going to spend it, but I think it's a really good conversation to have. It's a really good question to have. If I was to spend 25k of that money, how would I spend it? And what I'm seeing in conversations with clients, a lot of it comes back to promotion. We want to promote, we want to market, we want to win more market share. But before we do that, then I'm saying to clients, okay, before you do that, let's be very clear on a few things. What is your target market? What is your best customer? What do they look like? Who are you going to target with this marketing campaign? And what is your solution to their problems? What problems do that target segment have? What's your solution? Why are you different? What can you do? Where can you bring value? And those are the messages that you need to be pushing out there. And I do feel it's like a lot of things. If you go to a marketing person and ask them what to do, they'll tell you to market. But there is that planning to be done first. There is that strategizing to be done first. If you're not clear on your target market and what solution it is, what problem you're trying to solve, and what your solution is, you may not be talking to the right people. And then you potentially generate lots of leads, and you invest a lot of time in lots of leads that aren't actually going to go anywhere because they're not the right people for the solution that you have. So it's really important, I think, to take that time to think about your target market. What's their problem that you're fixing? What does your solution look like? before you jump into the marketing piece.
But I always say good marketing costs the same as bad marketing. And as long as you've got to understand your marketplace, there's also, where the fish are biting. That's the other thing. There's no point in casting your net out on the wrong side of the boat. You've got to understand where that money is. And there are a lot of people out there still making a lot of money. And it's just trying to find those people and make sure that you're kind of aligned with them. You've got a product that they're interested in. I think that's the ticket as well. There's no point in going to lots and lots of Zoom meetings. I seem to see the same people over and over again, but they're talking to the same audience who also don't have enough money. So where do they go then, to try and find new customers or try and break through in different areas?
Yeah, and I think that again,
50,000, very interesting. Lots of people I know, and also said to me, this is the cheapest money you're ever going to get your hands on. And if you want to know the truth, I snapped it up. It was in my bank account within 24 hours, and it is exactly what you're saying. It's actually sitting there at the moment. I thought, well, if I need it, if the worst comes to the worst, I can use it to pay my staff, pay myself, keep the company going. But also, it's what do I do with it next, and how do I, if I now I'm quite comfortable. Sorry, not asking about me, but other people. How do you recognise then how to spend that money, how to invest that money in the right way?
Yeah, and I think it's the same thing, isn't it? It's back to your point about the plan, and I think you made a very good point there about adopting and pivoting. And actually, I tend to say to people, if you think your existing customers have disappeared, then the reality is the demand has gone sideways, and you need to look and see where the demand is. And a couple of examples of that, I think, well, if you're not selling new cars, then you must be repairing other cars because they're getting older, aren't they? If people aren't buying new cars, you must be repairing the ones that they've got. So that kind of thing. So I think actually understanding where the market's moved to is right. And I think allied to that then is, I talk about the plan. I think you have to, because there's such a lot of uncertainty and things are quite volatile, you have to be prepared to throw some seed on the water. So slightly contradictory to what I just said, you have to be, come up with an idea, do a bit of market research, test the market quickly. Don't try and perfect the product before you test the market, because you might actually find, as you said, actually the fish aren't biting there. So I think it is getting the balance right between thinking it through, trying to identify where the market is, and then finding out whether the market is there or not. And if it's not, actually changing, moving again, trying something else. And people are changing all the time because of every day we get more information, don't we? So we've got forecasts, we've got projections, we've got predictions, but every day we learn a little bit more, and that might modify. And again, this is talking about scenario planning with people. I tend to find people come up with one view of the future. So this is what it's going to look like, and actually, if that doesn't map out, their plans don't then work necessarily. So my view is you need to try and have multiple views of the future, so at least 4 possibilities of what could happen, and then try and develop strategies that will work in all 4 of those. So this is where you come back to the basics, like becoming more efficient, improving your processes is going to work whatever happens in the economy going forward. Whereas if you commit to maybe a new piece of machine that can only produce one product, and then the demand for that slumps, that's a more risky strategy. So I think as business owners, what's our key thing as business owners and leaders at the moment? And I think it's managing risk. Actually, that's the one thing we don't necessarily talk a lot about or think about. But that's our jobs, I think, to manage risk, minimize the risk to the business, not to avoid risks altogether, but try and weigh up what the different options are and try and understand what the risk is, and then make some decisions about that. And that's perhaps a skill that we're not used to. And as I said, it's become more intense. Intense is another key word, because the consequences of not getting it quite right at the moment could be quite serious. But life's full of contradictions. This is what I find fascinating about businesses. Working with business people is these contradictions. So the contradiction is, do I wait to find out what's happening before I commit, or do I take slightly more risk and get in there early, but in such a way that I can adopt easily? So I don't spend all of my 50 grand on one thing. I spend 5 grand on a marketing campaign to see whether the demand is there or not, and if it's not, I change. So it is trying to get that there's the contradiction. Do I sit and wait in order to minimize risk, or do I throw something out there and see what happens? And I think we're faced with these contradictions all the time in business, making these decisions. Yeah.
But I think nowadays more than ever. You've got to really understand it more than anything. So how does one get to work with you then? Or what's the process then, mate? When you first meet a business leader or MD or whatever, what's your process? How do you start working with them?
Well, I think the first thing for me is to sit down with somebody like yourself, the business owner, the MD, and just spend a couple of hours talking through what it is they're trying to achieve and where they see the problems, where they see the challenges that they're going to face, and then understand where I think I can bring some value. So for me, I kind of sum it up by saying, well, what do? I help people get their businesses working for them. And I don't think they do. So it's interesting, throw that one back at you a little bit. You're talking about having to work weekends and long hours and things like that now. So does the business really work for you at the moment in the way that you'd like it to?
I think for me personally,
Yeah.
things calmed down now, because originally the news was such a continual flow, and we didn't really have the manpower without my input to do that. I think things have settled down now, and we've settled into working from home a lot better. We've settled into the process a lot better. So for me, and my biggest problem, like a lot of business people, is I love what I do. And so when you love what you do, it's no longer work. It's like a hobby that you earn money with, but at the same time, if you're not careful, you fall out of love with it. Now, I've been lucky enough, I've been doing this for 20 years and I still love it as much. I do have my bad days. Of course, we have our bad days. And there are some days you just want to hit your head against the wall and, bite your pillow at night or whatever, or have sleepless nights, because we care about our business. We care about our families. We care about the people that work for us. We care about, I care about my clients a great deal. I want to make sure they do well. But I forgot the question now.
Is your business working for you? And I think you said, yeah, it probably is, but there are problems.
Yeah.
There's always challenges. There's always challenges and opportunities, of course there is. And I think one of the things, I'm a bit like you. I'm very passionate. I grew up in a family business, so I'm very passionate about helping business people. And you're absolutely right. It's incredibly rewarding when you get great results. But it's also, it doesn't necessarily feel like a job really, because you're doing something that you're really passionate about, which is important. But I think what we sometimes overlook as business owners is that passion and drive that we have, and understanding for the business. We are literally thinking about our businesses every day, every minute of every day probably. And then I often find that people have a vision for their business or a plan, and which is front and center in their mind all the time. They just and then they kind of assume that everybody else has got the same vision as them and think about it in the same way that they do, when of course they're not. And one of the key issues is to make sure that actually everybody in the business is aligned, and actually they share that vision. I think that's one of the important things I often find working with a business. I would say probably incredibly rare to find a business owner, manager, leader that doesn't have a vision in their head for the future of the business and what it looks like 2, 3, 4, 5 years time. The trick is to making sure everybody else is aligned with the same vision. And as I said, because we think about it all the time, we think everybody else has got the same vision as we have. We don't necessarily share it. So people in the organization are coming in and working really hard every day and doing the very best they can. They're just not necessarily pulling in quite the right direction, because they don't know what the vision is in the owner's manager's head. So that's an important start point for me, making sure the vision is there, and then the team is aligned because we've communicated it effectively with everybody.
One of the things I've learned during this pandemic, and this is not talking about my own crew actually, because that'd be very unfair, but talking to other people, is some of the things that you learned about your team. Some people have raised their game. Some people who you felt perhaps, this is what I've been told, some people who have surprised their business owners or the managers, the MDs, by actually really stepping forward and going for it. And then there's other people within organizations who've actually let themselves down a little bit, and let down, or the owners feel they've let down the organizations a little bit. And I think that's been a bit of an eye-opener. I mean, you could say, well, the pandemic has, people react to different things in different ways. It's the old who's coming over the wall with me. I always like to think it maybe as an ex-military man, who's going to come out the trench and who's going to back me up. And I think there was that fighting mentality for some business owners when they look behind them to see which of their members of the team have really got their back. And I think that's been an eye-opener for lots of companies. Um,
Yeah, I think
you
again
found
it's
that as well, or is that just
I
me?
think absolutely right. I mean, you know, the theory is it's easier when things are going well, isn't it? The real test is when you start to apply some pressure or some heat, you know, like the pandemic, and then actually you will find people emerge, and some that you thought might don't. But we you know, there's a million and one reasons why those people may not have stepped up to the plate. As you said, everybody was very scared. You know, we've got families, we've got all sorts of things going on, and it's a massive, you know, threat to our health and the health of our families. So I think you have to understand what, you know, what's going through people's own lives that might impact how they respond. But I think it is interesting to see who has stepped up,
Mm.
and who needs a bit more encouragement, you know, to come forward. But yeah, I mean, I think when I work with clients, it does come down to three things. If we talked about the plan, we've now touched on the people, and the bit in the middle is the process. So, you know, those are the three kind of core areas I'm looking at. Have we got a good, robust plan that we've shared? Are our processes as efficient as they could be? And the answer to that is there's always room to be more efficient, no question. And actually, are the people doing the things that we need them to do? And often it's the third category that becomes the most challenging for business owners and leaders and managers, that they're not necessarily used to dealing with people in the way that they need to, especially in a, you know, a crisis like this. And I think that's again where we need to be, as I said, you know, our focus is on being a coach and minimizing risk and bringing people along with us, you know, all those things that we expect leaders to be doing, but actually we may not normally be experienced at, because we're not normally under the kind of pressure that we've been. So, you know, as I say, those people we can normally rely on, they've been brilliant all the way through, and suddenly they've kind of disappeared because of everything else that's going on in their lives. So actually, how do we bring them along with us? And some other people have stepped up. Maybe they're younger, maybe they don't have the same commitments outside of the firm, so they're more relaxed about things. I don't know. You know, you have to look into these things, don't you, and understand. But the plan, the process, and the people is important. And on the process, I want to come back to that, because I think where we are helping a lot with clients is we're improving processes, making them more efficient. And of course, we're talking about technology and artificial intelligence and all those things, and everybody's worried there won't be any jobs going forward. But that's not the consequence we're seeing. What we're seeing is people are being retasked. So stuff that wasn't getting done before is now getting done because we've automated other processes that, you know, don't need human interaction. So we can retask people to other things. So we're retasking them, or we're retraining them to do other things, or we're replacing them if they don't now have the skills that we need. And again, I think COVID is forcing us in to think about the technology and the efficiencies. Back to another point you made about going forward, you know, if when the furlough scheme is removed, I think we have to accept that there is going to be some fallout for that, because some businesses are, you know, really suffering. Hospitality as a sector, as we know, and so it's hard to see how there won't be some fallout. What we need is the government to act, you know, and to try and minimise that fallout, or at least get a recovery in place, you know, in the shortest time frame possible. And I think we all, you know, we could all do things, can't we? We can all do things as businesses. And when we went into COVID originally, people were trying to preserve cash, which of course is the right thing to do. But one of the questions I was asking is, well, look at your supply chain. Is there 2 or 3 smaller suppliers in there you can pay forward? You can continue to support and pay, because those, you know, that's an economy, isn't it? If we spend money with other businesses, we have an economy. If everybody just sits on their cash and spends none of it, we don't have an economy.
Mm.
So I'm not saying we need to get too carried away, but it's the same thing now. What can we do to support other businesses as we move forward? Rather than, you know, slashing costs and beating suppliers up to reduce their prices and everything else, what can we do to support people? Because if we spend money, we have an economy. Simple as that. And the government has given us money, 50 grand, 200 grand, whatever it is they've given us in these cheap loans, is for us to spend to help support the economy, isn't it, ultimately? So we have a responsibility, I think, to think seriously about doing that. Yeah.
So Randall and Payne, obviously you're doing a set amount of not classes. What do you call it? You're offering sort of free, not seminars or yeah. What is it that you guys are offering? Is it coaching, or, you know?
So whatever we need to do, really. So I mean, the blend of what I do is coaching. We do definitely do coaching, but we do just consultancy as well, and helping people support their plans, forecasting, and all those things that people need. So those things are about trying to get some clarity around the future and some visibility going forward to help you make the right decisions. Certainly offering a free 30-minute Zoom conference like this, so people can just contact me and we'll have a conversation about what it is, challenges that they're facing, and what we can do to help. And as I said, the first port of call for me is to have a conversation with them, understand what the problems are, understand where we can input, but also actually understand the person's mindset. And what I'm seeing, of course, is I am preaching to the converted in some senses, because the people that are reaching out to me are the ones that are taking action, and that's the key thing. We have to be taking action. The ones that I'm more worried about are the ones that are quiet, the ones that aren't reaching out for help. Those are the businesses that I'm more concerned about. But actually, there's lots of people reaching out for us for help, and they are, as I say, they are the ones that are being proactive and taking action. So it's, as we know, it's fantastic having a plan, but if you don't actually implement it, and that's certainly some of the feedback I get from the clients I work with. They very kindly say, "You're not that clever, Will, but you do make us do the things that we need to do." I probably disagree with the first bit slightly, but then I'm quite humble, really, Mark, as you know.
Yes. I tell you what, I've got to ask you, if you don't mind. Obviously, you've got that beautiful building behind you, and the world is changing.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to keep that? Do you see more of you in the future working from home? Do you, can you see a time where all of you will be back in that building, or has the future changed for Randall and Payne, like so many other business people?
I think it's a great question to ask, and one for us to think about going forward. We've had 50 plus people working from home pretty successfully. I have to say the team have been amazing. You talk about people stepping up. I think everybody in the team has stepped up, and the business is pretty much carried on as it was before, which is fascinating, really, given the changes in circumstances. There is a lot of talk, of course. I think this is another good example of where people tend to think in black and white terms, and I think it's settled down a little bit. There's a lot of talk about, we won't need offices anymore. Which seems to me to be a bit black and white. So you either need a big office like we've got, you need no office, and I think actually the reality is a hybrid, isn't it? So I think where you will end up is with smaller office space, more working from home. I think a lot of our team have felt that working from home has its advantages, and I've had that conversation with a lot of clients. My question around that, though, is I think it's one thing to work from home when you have to. The law says you have to work from home. So you tend to overlook the shortcomings of that because you don't have a choice. So I think it will be different when there's a choice. Do you want to work from home? I think people might see more of the shortcomings of working from home. And not to say that it's going to go away. I think we will end up with a more blended approach. There will be more people working from home more regularly than they did it historically. And I think, again, our team have demonstrated, as we would expect, that they can deliver the outcomes. So it's not so much about being at your desk 9 to 5. They're balancing childcare, they're balancing family commitments, they're balancing all sorts of things, and yet the work's getting done, which is fantastic,
Yeah.
Which is what we want. So I think we'll end up with a hybrid scenario. And I think will anybody sign up a 20-year lease, a 10-year lease on a big building like that, or any kind of building going forward? I'm not sure they will. And I think that's a really challenging one for landlords to work out what their model needs to be going forward. And it's the shared office spaces, the kind of Airbnb model, if you like, or the Uber model, where actually you just book rooms on a time basis. So, time becomes the measure. But I think you still need some kind of a permanent workplace, whether it's a smaller one, and then you just have bigger rooms when you need to, for all the team to get together. That seems to me. So it's a hybrid version. So I think a lot of stuff I read about property and other businesses and other things that are going on is it going to be this or that? The answer is, well, it won't be either of those two extremes. It will be somewhere in the middle. It'll be some hybrid version of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's a great question. I don't know the answer to your question.
What you said about, because the government's making you stay or advising you to stay, my big thing is it's okay working from home when you've got everybody else working from home. At the moment, I've got my daughter upstairs, she's working. I've got my wife in the room in the lounge, and she's got an office, desk in there. She's working from there as well. And at lunchtime, we all eat together. Now, if they all slowly drifted back and went back to, my wife went back to Lloyd's, and Hannah went up to, where she's working to. And then suddenly I'm here in the room on my own every day. It'd be just like I first started the business from my front lounge, and it gets quite lonely, and you get quite insular, and you don't have that sharing of ideas and things. I know we've got Zoom now, so I think more people might slip back and want to work from the office, is what I'm saying. I do agree with you, by the way. I think it is going to be a hybrid kind of thing. But
I think you're right. I mean, I went into the office. First time I went into the office was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And for me, I was quite yeah, indeed. I mean, I think there was 2 of us in the office that day, and it's there's obviously room for 50 plus people. So there was plenty of room for social distancing. But I was actually quite looking forward to going into the office, I have to say, and looking forward to talking about depreciation and FRS 102 with another accountant, because that's what we need to do. But I think that's, so on that side, I think it was interesting. The other thing I've discovered, which I've had to work at, is when I go, I mean, we work in an office, you and I, Mark. So my step count is probably between 3,000 and 4,000 a day when I'm at the office, which isn't fantastic, but it's not too bad. The first week I was home, I was doing about 300 steps a day, right. Which part of that was the intensity. Lots of calls with clients, lots of Zoom calls, lots of conversations, but I wasn't getting out of the chair. But what you realise is when you're in the office, you go and make a cup of coffee, you wander down to reception, you have to go out to the car, you do all these things, you wander around and chat to other people, and that actually adds up to 3,000 or 4,000 steps a day. Working from home, you're just rooted to the chair, for 8 hours, and you suddenly realise you haven't moved. So there's both a physical and a mental health issue there, I think, which we just need to learn to adapt to, and be aware of. But I think you're right. You're a marketeer, aren't you, by trade? So it's nice to talk to other marketing people and bounce ideas off them, which you can do on Zoom, but it's not quite the same as doing it in the office, I think, face to face, even now.
Yes, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I don't know what I'm going to do myself. We've got the nice fire station. I go in once a week. I normally go in on a Tuesday, and I kind of enjoy it, actually. I must enjoy the peace and quiet in the office to myself. I don't turn the heating on mine, and I don't have no heating. I don't turn the lights on. I keep everything as bare as possible. I try to say, maybe I'm just tight. Maybe I'm just enjoying. I sit there with my jacket on.
You must have been an accountant in a former life, Mark, I think.
Maybe I have been, but my idea is just to try and keep everything as slim as possible. Not me, by the way. I put on loads of weight during this lockdown, but keep the costs down as much as possible. But it goes back to your point again about investing for the future and all the rest of it. But will we have the office? I don't know either. I think it's a work in progress at this particular moment. I think a lot of other business people that I talk to are exactly the same. I think there's going to be some people, do you know what, who don't want to go back to the office at all, who actually maybe in the future don't want to go back to that business anymore. I used to work in Bath and drive down to Bath every day for 7.5 years. Of course, it got to a point where, I got sick of that. But there'll be other people now who've had this chance to work from home. Think, actually, I don't want to do that driving. I don't want to sit up.
I think this is, where people have worked out how to work from home because they've been forced into it. And, clients up in London, for example, I'm talking to and saying, I really don't want to be commuting. So number one is the trains and the underground, aren't, there's not as many of them as there was. So there's restrictions on public transport, as we know. So then they're looking at driving in and alternatives, and they're just thinking, I just don't want to do it. Not when I'm working so effectively from home. But again, they're not saying they're never going to go into the office during the course of the week. But it's actually now getting the balance right between having to travel to the office or traveling directly to clients or working from home. And I think, again, if you look at some businesses I was chatting to, and they're saying, well, if you think about what we do, we generally meet at clients' premises, or we can be working from home in exactly the same way we're working from the office. And in one case, a lot of the work they were doing was outside normal office hours anyway. So I think it actually doesn't make sense to have an office now going forward. So I think people are rethinking this. And I think there will also be a generational thing, as we know. We're embracing Zoom technology, but my boys are on WhatsApp and all that technology and stuff that I don't even know what it means. They're using Reddit and goodness knows what else. So I think for that generation, they'll be much more open to flexible working offices and turning up in shared spaces. They won't do it the traditional way that we've done it with a permanent office where you go 9 to 5. That was already happening anyway, wasn't it? But I do think generational stuff. As you said, well, the Zoom, have to get used to using that, don't we? Whereas the younger generation, it's just second nature.
I didn't do very well connecting to you.
We did fine. We got in there in the end. I think we were just trying to get three. One of us was trying to get in twice, but anyway, we worked it out.
I had 3 different meetings going, mate. So
yeah.
I don't know what I did there.
You're such a popular guy. That's what it is.
Oh well, that's very, very kind. Anyway, I think we're kind of running out of time there, really. If there's one piece of advice that you'd like to give people, I always ask business people this. I met Julian Duckerton, Dale Vince, and quite a few other business people over the years. We're very, very fortunate. And I always ask them, what's the one piece of advice you could give anybody? What would that be? What would that be?
I think it would be linked to your word about focus, but I think for me is don't overthink it. You need to fight at the moment. The world's changing. You've got to find out what works. So don't overthink it. Take information from other people. Have a sounding board. Don't be afraid to share ideas, but actually at the same time, don't overthink it. At some point, you've got to take some action. The longer you leave it, the harder it's going to be, and the more you slip behind competitors if you don't act. So I think it's all about action at the moment. So I think that would be it for me. Don't overthink it. Act. See what happens. Deal with the consequences.
Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thanks very much. Really nice to talk to you again, and hopefully see you soon in person.
Indeed, Mark. Thank you. I appreciate your time and the conversation. Talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.